Yeah, shall we talk about the cocaine boat because there's been another
Yes,
fascinating update in that case.
yes. So look, obviously it made headlines around the world last week when the MV Matthew was caught. 100, well, the guards say 157 million. You and I would, it was 2.25 tons. So we always try and look at it from the street perspective. The
Yeah,
guards, to be fair to them, they have the international stuff, but we have to maybe contextualize it more. And they, to be fair to the guards, they can't say how much it would be diluted, but the Jerry Harrell from Revenue said usually it could be trebled, but he didn't want to go into speculations. That's why we say 450 odd million. So we know that there were 20, I think it's 25 people on the ship. The captain wasn't on it, and he'd be careful. But there were 25 people on that ship. As the investigation has continued, 8 people have now been arrested and charged. So 7 people have been appeared in court. I think one person is appearing in court today, and that does tally with what Assistant Commissioner Justin Kelly said. He at the very start in the press conference last Wednesday, he said he expected more arrests, and there have been more charges. But look, this is a major investigation, and one of the big aspects about this was the involvement of the Kenyan cartel. Obviously, when any big seizure like this happens, it is where the Kenyans involved. So I think that the guidance we're getting is they may not have been involved in the selling and the physical distribution of it, but the belief would be that the Kenyan cartel was involved in funding this, because obviously there's a huge amount of funding that goes into it. So look, the Gardaí did, for example, release information the other day that investigators from Interpol have come to Ireland to help with this investigation. And that shows the international aspect of this. As they say, drugs crime is now transnational. So the guards do go abroad in investigations, and they're bringing in the Interpol expertise to help with the investigation. So I think it's probably fair to say that there will be more arrests and there will be uh, more people's collars being felt in relation to this.
yeah, it's fascinating. I heard you say on the pod. I wanted to ask you about this. Just the pod covering the initial story. That this might, in a sense, be kind of only a small drop in the ocean in terms of, they're going to get plenty more drugs through. And I've seen people argue, oh well, what's the point in the war on drugs because they're just going to keep coming back in. But I mean, 500 million worth of cocaine
Yeah.
is not to be taken lightly. I mean, that is a significant portion. Okay, obviously it was maybe only a small portion of that was being taken
Mm.
for this country, but I certainly was under the impression, and certainly from what Justin Kelly said, that I mean this is more significant than just your average drugs bust. I mean, this would have been a serious disruption to multiple drug gangs, including the Kinahan cartel.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about that. Like, let's not forget this. It's alleged they bought the boat for something like
Hmm.
10 million quid, and they bought various other things for hundreds of thousands and stuff. So this wasn't a small scale operation.
Mm.
But so look, there's no doubt it was a massive operation. But you know, Maocan, which is this EU's anti-drugs smuggling operation headed by Mick O'Sullivan, formerly headed by Mick O'Sullivan, who has been on the pod a couple of times. I think they've seized about 10 billion euro worth of cocaine in the last 4 or 5 years. That's a lot
Mm.
of cocaine. Now, look,
It's a lot.
it is, they're significant dents. A lot is getting through. More is getting through than it is getting caught. Most people would accept that. It's just, is it 70%? Is it 80%? It could be 6%. We don't know. I mean, because they don't publish it, but a lot does get through. A lot is being caught, and that is testament to Marocain and groups like the Guards and Policia Local and the Guardia Civil in Spain, the NCA in England. There's a concerted international anti-drugs campaign. It is working, but
Mm.
this is a big business. And I mean, speaking to Mick O'Sullivan, he would say that Europe is now one of the main areas of business for the Colombian cartels because there's so much money and it makes so much money for them. But the good guys have bad days and the bad guys have bad days. There's no doubt about that.
They clearly thought that Ireland was the weak link, like the back door to Europe in a sense. But hopefully, this shows that that's not the case.
Well, yeah, look, I did say before when I was talking to Kieran Bradley last week, one of the things about Brexit is gangs are using Ireland more because they previously would have gone to, say, Rotterdam or Antwerp, one of the big ports, and from there they would have brought it over to Britain via
Mm.
Calais or whatever. But there are more administrative checks because of Brexit now. So it's easier to bring it into Ireland. There are still checks, obviously customs still checks and stuff, but there's a common travel area. And it just and you know all about the green channel and the red channel, like boring people about the Windsor Agreement or whatever it is. It's easier to get stuff from Ireland into Britain than it is from Europe into Britain. And that's just the way of the world. And criminals, they will find the path of least resistance. They want as few checks as possible. So that's why they're coming here. So look, there's no doubt. So that's one of the issues that we face. There is an issue with Defence Force capabilities at the minute, not because it's just basically they don't have enough staff, people are leaving. We know that the Defence Forces, the Naval Service has 6 ships. Well, actually 8, but there are 2 patrol vessels, inshore patrol vessels bought for €26 million from New Zealand earlier this year. They're not in service yet, but they're technically part of the fleet. But there are 6 ships. They can only use 2 at the moment. And even that operation against the MV Matthew, really, talking to military experts, there should have been 2 ships involved in that. There was one, the Ellie William Butler Yeats. There was one AW139 helicopter. There should have been 2 to provide top cover. And things like that. So look, there's no doubt the Defence Forces, numbers-wise, are at a low ebb, and they're really struggling. Now, the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, who's the Minister for Defence as well as Foreign Affairs, says the government is doing everything they can. But this really is an indication of how the Defence Forces are struggling manpower, personnel-wise. So of course, criminals and transnational criminals are going to try and exploit that. It makes perfect sense for them to do that.
Yeah, and I find this whole topic fascinating, so I will move off it in a second. But just another thing that I found interesting is that doesn't this show, like, in spite of all of the blows that they have taken, the massive pull that the Kinahan cartel still has. I mean, the fact that they're involved in this, and in a sense, they're looked at as the suppliers. They're the ones that have the contacts in Colombia that are able to get the drugs in spite of all the knocks that they've had. They still are a massive powerhouse. I mean, I think that's extraordinary. It's just business as usual for them in spite of everything.
Do you remember when the sanctions were imposed by the Americans last April? Do you remember I did a story, we put it up on the Mirror online, it was in the Star, where I was speaking to a very experienced drugs investigator, and he said, it would be business as usual for the Kinahans. Do you remember that story? I might actually retweet it. I'll put it up there on.
Well, he was right.
He was right. I might know that fella pint. But anyway, so yes, and the Kinahans are the people who have the international contacts. Now, there is a guy from North Dublin who's a very big criminal himself, and we know that he sent one of his main underlings to Colombia a couple of years ago. So there are, and I think Justin Kelly did say this, that there are Irish crime gangs developing contacts in Colombia. But really, as was said to me 12 years ago, the Kinahans are the Man United of crime in Ireland. They're the tier 1 people, and they have the contacts. That was said by a very senior fella in drugs. So yeah, the Kinahans are where it's at. They have that level of expertise and connections.
Well, I mean, these other gangs would want to hope they're starting to make these connections, because if they do eventually get the Kinahans, and the hope is that they do, that's a huge vacuum that's going to be left there. I mean, that's really at the heart of it. How you're going to stop this from coming in is by cutting it off at the head, isn't it? I mean, the drugs are just going to keep coming in, but you take down the people that have the contacts, and that's what's really going to stop.
But you remember, going back a long time ago, when the Gilligan cartel or the Gilligan gang was dismantled after the murder of Veronica Guerin, people took over from them. So if the Kinahans are done for, we can talk about the family. They're a big, or they would be regarded. The family would be regarded as the biggest crime gang in Ireland operating at the minute. Kinahans are massive, but I don't think they're really operating that much physically in Ireland. So that the family are there. There will always be criminals who take over from other criminals because the profits are so vast. Now, the Kinahans have massive contacts, and that's the different issue, and they are working on an international level. But there will be people who take over from the Kinahans. There's no doubt about that.